The next item on the agenda is sea level rise and building heights. This came up at our last City Commission meeting. There's been discussion at the Blue Ribbon Panel. There's been discussion at the Flooding Mitigation Committee. And since Commissioner Wolfson is not yet here, let's put this off for a few minutes and give him a chance to, he is on his way, and he chairs the Flooding Mitigation Committee, so let's wait for him to discuss that. Which brings us to number 3, the discussion on proposed amendments to the single-family home ordinance, which I think many of you today are here with reference to that one. Mr. Mooney, would you like to introduce it first?
Sure. Madam Chair, this is an item that was referred by the City Commission at their July 23rd meeting. It's a dual referral to both the Land Use Committee and to the Planning Board, and it's anticipated that the Planning Board will take this up at their September meeting. The referral was fairly specific in terms of the modifications and clarifications that were proposed. The first being, and probably the most significant that has generated the most questions, is the clarification of the definitions of interior side open space, internal courtyards for lot coverage purposes. And as the committee is probably aware, under the previous single-family ordinance that was adopted in 2006, there was a requirement put in place for interior side yards of homes that had a depth greater than 80 feet for 2 stories. And the requirement was that indentations and internal open space be applied to break up that very long, stark massing of 2-story homes. And there was also a provision for the DRB to be able to waive that on a case-by-case basis if the architecture achieved that. When the most current ordinance was adopted in February of this year, there was another requirement put into place that mandated that 3-sided courtyards count in the lot coverage. And what we began to see was that architects, in some instances, expanded the size of the internal courtyards needed to address the setback requirements, but in a manner that created a large internal courtyard that ran afoul of the requirements of the most recently adopted ordinance that counted those areas as lot coverage. In order to distinguish between the two, staff came up with an interpretation regarding the internal open space areas that allowed those areas to not be counted in lot coverage if they were left at grade and if they didn't exceed 50% of the developable width of the building. What we've seen since the adoption of the ordinance is that it has sort of created an internal conflict that we think needs to be addressed. And so what we've done is we've explicitly defined what constitutes an internal courtyard, what constitutes an internal side yard open space requirement, but more importantly, we set forth an outside limit on how big those internal side yard open space areas can be. The code sets forth a minimum requirement that they be at least 8 feet in width, 8 feet in depth, and that they be a minimum of 1% of the size of the lot, but there was no maximum. And we've suggested that there be a maximum depth not to exceed 30% of the developable width of the building and a maximum overall size not to exceed 5%. This would still allow for a very comfortable larger open space area should a homeowner desire it. It would not affect the minimum that is required. But more importantly, if somebody wanted to do a much larger space that would begin to constitute a courtyard, that would just simply be counted in the overall lot coverage calculations. So that was probably the most significant change that was proposed. The other one had to do with the 70% rule as it pertains to interior height volumes. Right now under the code, if you've got a 2-story building, a 2-story single-family home that exceeds 25% lot coverage, the second floor cannot be more than 70% of the first floor. And that works very well if you're building out to a 30% lot coverage and you're not seeking any type of volumetric space. However, if you're between 25% and 30% and you want a little bit more first floor volumetric space, there's a provision that allows the DRB to waive that 70% rule, which we felt has worked pretty well. The only suggestion that we've made is that the language be fine-tuned so that one-car garages not be included in that overall calculation, and that the calculation only apply to what is truly the two-story volume of the home. If somebody's proposing a two-story structure where you would have a second floor over the parking, then that would be counted toward the overall 70%. The next requirement was a requirement that the DRB review new homes on all lots created by a lot split. Currently, under the code, the only time that DRB review is mandated is if there's a pre-1942 home on one or more of the lots that are being proposed to be split. This would require that DRB review all homes on all lots, regardless of whether there's a pre-42 home or not. The next regulation was a referral that proposed to allow roof decks only on homes with direct access to the open bay or on a single-story home. So two-story homes that were not on the open bay would no longer be permitted to have rooftop decks. And then the last proposal was to extend the year of required DRB review for the replacement of architecturally significant single-family homes from 1942, which is the current year, to the year 1966. There was also some minor fine-tuning of portions of Section 142-108 that we suggested happen in order to further clarify what the notice and posting requirements would be if you're seeking a determination of architectural significance, but you're proposing to retain and preserve the home, as well as the requirements for new construction should an emergency demolition order be issued. So with that, and I know that we had spoken, Commissioner, about some potential modifications, which I can read into the record if you want, or I can do that after discussion.
Yes, could you read that? Well, I would like to discuss one item first, and then if you can read the other ones
Okay.
into the record. The one item that I had not realized when I suggested extending the year of required DRB review from for significant homes from 1942 to 1966, that although there were 412 homes that were built prior to 1942, homes that were built from after World War II, basically 1945 to 1966, number over 2,150. I had not realized the number of homes we're talking about. We only have one design review board in the city. They are working people. They are architects and designers that have full-time jobs, and they only meet once a month. Consequently, in discussion with the planning department, I think that it would be better to, instead of have 1966, have all homes that want to be demolished in the city of, whose owners want to demolish, and the homes never want to be demolished, whose owners want to demolish the homes, whether they were built in 1990 or 1960. They have to go to get a building permit prior to being demolished. This is going to keep us from having empty lots around the city, sometimes with weeds growing, and they sometimes sit there for a year, 2, 3, depending on the retail climate and housing climate. They could sit there for 5 years. This way, before a home is destroyed and demolished, the owner of the home or their representatives and architects have to present their plans both to the planning department, the building department, in order to get their building department, as well as public works and fire. Those are all required prior to receiving a building permit. Once the building permit is received, the plans have all been designed for the new home, then the home can be demolished. And it really doesn't matter whether the home was built in 1966 or 1996, because truthfully, the architecture is not that different. So my suggestion is that, to the other members of the Land Use Board, is that all homes, before they can be demolished, need to have a building permit and appear before the building department, the planning and zoning, public works and fire to get that building permit. And the planning department and building department will have the opportunity at that time to make sure they're following all the rules and regulations of the new single-family home ordinance.
And Commissioner, if I may, because I just wanted to read the numbers into the record so that everybody's clear. There's a current inventory of what we have in the city on single-family homes. Pre-1942, 2,479. From 1942 to 1965, 2,156. So it would basically double what would be reviewable. And between 1966 and 2012, we have 417 homes that were built in the city. So 46 years, we only had 400, and in the basically 20 years after the war, we had 2,156. So it would be. I just wanted the public to back you up on the numbers that you were talking.
Commissioners, you have anything to? Okay, we'll open it.
No, I mean, has
open it
the
to
public
public.
spoken yet, or?
No, I was going to call upon the public next.
See some distinguished.
Okay, would any
Great
members of the
people.
public care to come forward to discuss
Saul.
any of these 5 points? The interior side yard open space, the modification of the 70% rule, adding a requirement of DRB to review the new homes on lots created by a lot split, the roof decks, and the permitting. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Commissioner Malakoff, Commissioner Greco, and Commissioner Wolfson. My name is Carol Housen. I live at 7330 Ocean Terrace. Been a beach resident for 13 years. I've served 2 terms on Design Review Board, so every tear down that's come through us, I've walked the property. Just one question and then just some few comments, if you'd give me the courtesy of letting me read it. As far as your process to planning, building department, public works, and fire, to any tear down or demo permit, will it require an engineer report? Will it have to qualify? Because many of these homes have had to qualify under engineer reports to not be repairable. Is that going to be a condition? No.
No.
Do away with that. Okay, that's good. Okay, there was a long process starting over a year ago regarding single-family homes, including workshops, meetings, hearings, and I attended probably most of these meetings. Most of us have had the impression that once the changes were in place, things would be static for a little while. We're here now, a year, less than a year, with all these new adoptions and new agendas. I'm a real estate broker professionally. It's what I do for a living, and I can tell you that folks are concerned with the new process starting. There'll be more uncertainty in the real estate market. Literally, I'm getting calls daily. What's going on? No, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to buy it. No, I'm scared. If we get a zoning in process, we better stop. So I've already felt a panic through many investors I work with. I also think that, well, the 66, you've already covered that, so I'm not even going to address that. I consider myself an active member in the Miami Beach community. I run a nonprofit. I serve on 2 condominium boards. I do Crime Watch. I work with the police academy. So I'm pretty all over, not just North Beach. And my office was in South Beach for 3 years, so I'm pretty familiar with the whole area. Most of the people I've reached out to this week to discuss what's on this agenda are out of town or busy and weren't even aware of today's meeting. And if I didn't get the email, I probably would have missed it. I almost missed it. And having reviewed DRB files for a number of years, I think I'd like to ask as the commission that you be very sensitive to what do they want. I try to base my decisions on the whole of the picture, not the minority or not just the one person, protecting property rights. And I'm seeing this trend of what people want, and it's not necessarily about preservation or non-preservation. People don't want small, tiny bathrooms. People don't want 500-foot, one-bedroom apartments. So I feel I've seen enough files. I've probably sold over 1,000 properties in North Beach to say, what do people want? And we need to take that into consideration. What do your voters want? It's not what do I want. What do they want? And I say listen to it. And couple other comments, and I'll just take a minute. The side yards ruling that we're discussing today, I think could be too restrictive, and if there were too many in an area, it could create a feeling of a PUD, and I want to be cautious that that doesn't happen, because I'm watching these architects break up side yards now with water movement and cutouts, which are beautiful, and if we would make it too restrictive, it may slow it down, and it might not be as pretty in the end for what we're looking to achieve. The 70% rule on the roof on the second floor, I'm getting more and more files with more living space on the second floor. We live in a flood zone, we have water issues, and I found something kind of interesting on the some housing that's come through, which have over 70% second floors. When you walk in front of that property, you can actually see the water. So take that into consideration, because the trend might be going a different way with lesser square footage on the first floor and more weight on the second. And one more comment, which this came to me by request from a couple HOA presidents about the roof deck, that some owners were extremely concerned to losing their right to build a roof deck if they live in a two-story home and they're on a dry lot.
Okay.
And considering Miami Beach is 7.5 miles long and very narrow, third floor is going to give you a breeze. So I don't know, should we take that away from the dry lots? It's going to really impact the value of those homes.
Okay.
Thank you
very
for
much.
listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Housen, and you had some very good points, and we hesitate to make changes to the single-family development regulations, which, as you mentioned, were just passed in February. The devil's in the details. I don't think these are really major changes, but they're clarifications. At the 70% second floor is just a clarification, and the Design Review Board still has the opportunity to waive that if they feel that the second floor should be larger. That's not being taken away. It's just more clarifications. About the lot splits, that's something that's newer, but I think it's been needed for a long time, because lot splits normally are done by people who want to sell the homes for speculation, and which is fine. Everybody's entitled. I definitely believe in private property rights, and we all do, I think. But when there's a lot split, it's often done to get the most as possible from the lot, and therefore it's not that we're preventing it in any way. It's just saying let's have another board look at it, which is the Design Review Board, or the Historic Preservation Board if it's in a historic district. So a lot of this, Carol, is really clarifications rather than brand-new rules. But you're right, we want to do what's right for the residents throughout the city, and not just North Beach, not just South Beach, not Middle Beach, not just the islands. But we're trying to find the best. You can't legislate compatibility any more than you can legislate. Here, there's a good architect standing here. We can't legislate good architecture. So we're trying to do the best we can to have the best architecture possible, that the neighbors on each side and across the street will be pleased with the new home. Mr. Chof.
Thank you, Mrs. Malikoff, Commissioner Malikoff. I don't have anything set to say. I just have a couple of opinions on what some of these things are. I do believe on a lot split, DRB is a mandate. I know a lot of architects are going to hate me for this, but I agree on a lot split, a DRB should be mandated, 100%. One of the things that I want to talk about is how the volumetric space is actually calculated when you're talking about the maximum 60-foot run, and then you need to come back a minimum of 8 feet, creating those courtyards. Well, right now, you have to bring, in order for it to qualify, you have to measure from grade. And what happens in that case is a lot of architects, and me included, I like to design reflecting ponds or landscape areas with sliding doors that go from area to area in a home. If you take it from grade, the grade is so much below the finished floor that those become blank walls and unusable. So what I would propose is some sort of language to modify that it's taken from maybe finished floor, FEMA finished floor minus 6 inches, so at least we can provide those spaces that are usable, and it benefits the neighbors and it benefits the homeowners, because now you have beautiful usable space there. And you're only talking about something that's maybe 3 feet high, the average person.
Ralph, aren't you building from base floodplain, not from grade?
Well, it's taken from, the grade is the sidewalk elevation in front of the lot. So what happens is the definition of those open spaces, it can only qualify as an open space if you take it down to grade, if it's, that open space is to grade. What I'm saying is to add a modification to that to make it FEMA finished floor -6 in those open areas, so at least we can, no?
Now, the actual elevation that you can take it to is adjusted grade. So you can take it to the midpoint of sidewalk elevation and finished flood elevation. That's what your yard can be. And the purpose of that was to make sure that that side yard open space did not become a large wall. That was the concern we had with allowing that area to come up to finished flood elevation or the elevation of the home. Now, could there be a midway point between finished flood elevation and adjusted grade? Perhaps, but that's something that I think would need further study. But I think that a starting point would be, as suggested, adjusted grade, which is the maximum elevation, because it would ensure that that would be mostly open space that you could still step down to. But for those homes that have a much higher base flood elevation, it's a lot of steps to come down to. So it could be something where perhaps it's adjusted grade plus a certain number of feet subject to DRB approval. There could be a number of different formulas for those lots that have a much higher base flood elevation.
Well, Tom, maybe that could be studied that it could say up to +8 NGVD. At least those homes that are +8 would have the garden or the reflective pond right there, and you're only talking maybe a 3-foot-high wall from grade, and people are above that. Anything over 8 feet, I can understand you putting a restriction on, but I would put that, I would modify that.
Yeah, a cap might be a good idea, so that the taller homes, they're just going to have to live with something that is lower that they'll have to step down to, but those homes that are not substantially above the sidewalk might have a midpoint.
Okay.
Great. And the second point I'd like to make real quick is not counting the garages as part of the first floor when you do the volumetric study of second floor to first floor. I believe that those one-story garages should be counted because they are a one-story structure within the home. We can't go in there and say, well, they don't exist. Well, they do exist, and they're part of the architecture of the house. They're part of the structure that you see. So by excluding those garages, it's very unfair to the homeowner and the architect in what to design. And so I believe those garages must be included, at least the 500 square feet of them. And last but not least, I don't believe there should be any limitations on interior courtyards, because sometimes we have these dynamic designs that have interior courtyards for these residences. Not only does it cut back any area that is adjacent, that buildable area that's adjacent to the properties next door, it creates just great, wonderful open courtyard spaces that these old homes used to have and these modern homes should be able to have. So I think it's a penalty to the architect in designing this stuff. So
Okay,
that's all I
thank
got to
you.
say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Peter Luria, 1800 West 23rd Street. I'm very happy that this committee is looking into these issues. I have a question that I'd like to ask you, Commissioner Malikoff. Is your proposal that those pre-66, the 2100, will still go to Design Review Board?
Unfortunately, no. I had thought that originally, but
Okay.
my understanding is if it did, the Design Review Board would have to meet weekly or at least twice a month, and planning staff would have to be greatly augmented with more members because the numbers of hundreds of more files that would be expected to come in, it's just a question of numbers. So, however, that doesn't mean they're not going to be reviewed. My proposal is they do get reviewed by Tom Mooney and staff to make sure that they're following what the single-family development regulations are after.
Am I losing my time?
Are you losing your time?
Yeah,
We'll add you more time. Not
I'm sorry, I want to hear you, but I did want to have time at the end.
subtract my answer.
I respectfully would
I-
disagree with that,
okay.
and I'll tell you why. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Mooney and his staff. I also have a lot of respect for the Design Review Board, and I found that in almost every case that I've seen where a house goes to Design Review Board, it has turned out better than if it hadn't. And it also gives leverage to the neighbors to mitigate the impact of a new home. So the more that can go to Design Review Board, the better. Now, it's a shame to let the cart lead the horse. If the problem is more should go to Design Review Board, there should be solutions, whether it's more staff for the planning department, another maybe half a day a month for the Design Review Board to meet or something like that. I'd like to come up with a better solution than try to say, well, we want to avoid the Design Review Board, because I find that when you avoid the Design Review Board, there is very little leverage that neighbors have. And otherwise, why have a pre-42 go to Design Review Board? Why couldn't it just go to the planning department if that was the case? And I've seen in instances it really makes a difference. In addition, I would like to add another thing. I think, like any endangered species, you protect the habitat. In other words, if you want to try to save an animal, you don't get rid of the whole forest and say, we'll save this animal, but the whole environment is going to be, flattened out. The same is true on a pre-42. I think that homes that are being built adjacent to a pre-42 should go to Design Review Board. It gives leverage to the neighborhood. It will help protect the pre-42s that are existing. And so I would like to see that added, in addition to adding all the pre-66 homes going to Design Review. I'd like to find a better solution so that it enables it to go to that review process. And lastly, on the subject of the roof decks, I think as it's written now that you're proposing to eliminate the roof decks except for the homes that are on the open bay.
Or on single-family homes? Single-story homes, I mean.
Yeah, okay. I believe that single-story homes should be allowed to have a second story instead of, a roof deck instead of a second story. But I think there's still privacy issues, which is the big problem with the roof terraces, and I think they should all be eliminated, including on the open bays for double-story homes. They can have a nice balcony. What happens is most of the time it's for show or for sale, but it's not really practical, and in that case it allows them to build a bigger house because they don't need to keep the land, because they have a roof deck to use. And I think that if it's a two-story house throughout the city on single-family homes, eliminate the ability to put roof decks in. Only allow it if it's a single-story home. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Peter. Any other members wishing to speak? Daniel?
Yes, hi, Commissioner
Good
and
afternoon.
members of the board. Good afternoon. I had some photos I wanted to show, but I think in the interest of time, I just want to kind of agree with Peter Luria's comment, which is that one of the major benefits of this new ordinance was that it was going to increase the scope of review from 1942 to 1966, which would have accounted for 80% of demolition homes going through DRB. And I know myself because I come here at every DRB and there's about 5 homes a month that are reviewed. And, there may be a few more, but it's really worth it because the process itself is a good process. So I'm very concerned about now, I don't know if you're thinking of rolling back the pre-42 review or is it just...
No.
Okay, so basically you've just decided you don't want to go a step further to update it to pre-66. But the thing is that when you guys remove the lot coverage scales, it kind of evened out the playing field for all the homes, so there's no quote-unquote penalty to demolish. So in that case, I think it is more fair that we update to pre-66 because there will be more reviews for the homes. And frankly, I sent out an email to a bunch of homeowners yesterday about how great this ordinance was. And some of them are here today, but I think there would be a lot more here if we had known that 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 update wasn't going to go through. Like Peter said, if you're next to a pre-42 home, if you're in a historical neighborhood, it's a good idea just to have that review process.
I think it's a great idea. It's just a question of, is it workable? And I think the commission needs to discuss it further, the full commission.
Right, that's true.
With reference, because there's dollar signs attached to it. In other words, if
Yeah.
we hire 3 planners, that's raising, what the personnel costs are.
Yeah, I understand.
If we ask the design review board to sit for 2 days, will they be willing to serve on it?
Right.
And my understanding is now that Mr. Mooney, how many files, how many homes does the design review review now for each of their meetings each month?
I actually
Joe?
just asked Mr. Murphy that question because he sits with that board, and it's anywhere between 5 and 10. And the difference between the planning department reviewing, as I told you earlier, Commissioner, we don't have a policy opinion here. We just have to tell you what the consequences are. It's different to review a building permit for conformity with the single-family home ordinance than it is to prepare an application and get an application through DRB. If 2,157 homes are now subject to design review board review if they're going to be demolished, that would significantly increase our output. And 5 to 10 more applications a month would be a substantial amount, a substantial increase in the workload. I know a lot of people have talked about Coral Gables. Coral Gables Board of Architects meets weekly. They have a larger pool to choose from because they sort of work like an appellate court. There might be 10 of them, and any 3 or so sit on any weekly panel. I know Tom and I are both Gables residents. You can get an entire application through the Board of Architects in 10 days. They also don't have lobbying restrictions. So our pool of architects and landscape architects to choose from is limited because of people don't want to give up their practice. I'm sure. Where's Ralph? Where's he sitting? He ran off. Okay. Well, I mean, if he wants to serve, he can't because he'd have to give up his practice. We would obviously find a way to do it, but we would be negligent in our responsibilities if we didn't tell you it would require 5 to 10 more applications a month is another couple people for us.
Right.
Can I make a recommendation?
I do think that the commission needs to discuss this further.
Yeah, I would just recommend that. I think you're right on that. Maybe it can be discussed further either here or even at the planning board to really get a hold on how many a month are we really talking about. And then just to wrap it up, the lot split review is really great. And by the way, I want to thank you. Other than that issue that we just learned about, I think it's a great ordinance. And thank you all for being proactive about this. I think you've all been watching the planning board and the DRB, and you're really responding to the concerns of the homeowners, which is very important. Roof decks on dry lots, it's happening on Toledo now, and ask any next door neighbor what it's like to have a roof deck right next to them on a very narrow lot. It's not a good thing. The internal side courtyard, the Pritchards are here from San Marino, and they can give you some insight on what it's like to have one of these massive homes that is trying to go with the loophole of the side courtyard. So that's a great update. And the final thing is notifications. I think it's important to notify homeowners if a home is added onto, even if it's retained. I emailed you about that, and I sent some photos of 2405 Meridian, where all of a sudden this massive addition was added with no neighbor input. So I would probably take out that addition that neighbors don't have to be notified, because it's all about a public process and making sure that these neighborhoods are
Mr. Mooney, is it possible to put a notice in front of the house when a architecturally significant home is going to use the 60% addition, which is allowed in order to incentivize people to keep their pre-1942 homes?
Yeah, we had talked about this, Commissioner, and one of the things that we were going to suggest as a modification to the ordinance that has been proposed is that the posting requirements in, or the mail notice requirements in Section 142-108A shall not be required, but the posting requirement would remain.
So it will be posted.
okay, but there would no longer be the mailing which
No.
is done, which seems to benefit the neighbors. So
It does,
I'd
but the
recommend it be
posting,
there.
anybody who lives right near there, across the street, next door, will see it posted that the homeowner is planning to add to their architecturally significant and be aware of it, and they can come to hearings. It's posted when it's going to be heard.
Okay, if they're in town.
Well,
Okay,
But-
well, thank you.
Again, just the
Thank
posting
you.
for architectural significance doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to do a big addition. It could mean that they just want that determination of architectural significance for other reasons, for future property owner reasons, or maybe to do a smaller addition, because there's other incentives than just the 60% unit size or the 40% lot coverage.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
Mickey Marrero, 200 South Biscayne Boulevard. Here not on behalf of anybody in particular, just in general as a concerned attorney. I do want to also thank you for the time you've taken in looking at these things. I share Carol's concern that there is a little bit of uncertainty as we've heard from some people that are out of town that what are these changes, what do they mean? And in explaining to them, a lot of them are okay with some of the changes. I will tell you that I heard a lot of concern, and for the same reasons you expressed, I'm concerned about expanding it to pre-66. I think your idea is a good one because it will give the homeowner the requirement to actually have a home that's reviewed and meets code before they demolish it, so you eliminate the possibility of having blank or vacant lots throughout single-family neighborhoods. I happen to staff has a better knowledge than I do, but I happen to, in preparation for this, I looked at the agendas for August and September for DRB, and they're not all homes and they're not all pre-42 homes, but there were 20 items in August, 13 in September. Some of that was, commercial buildings, so it's not all single family and it's not all pre-42, but it's a board that, and Carol can tell you, they do a great job and they spend a lot of time, but it's been hard to get 7 people on that board. I think we've had at least 6 at the most for years. And with the 6,
We don't have 7 people on that.
right, it's been hard to get, we have 6 now. And even with the 6, sometimes you have 4 or 5 because of scheduling issues. Last month, they had to move the meeting to 1 o'clock. So to add that volume of properties to their review, I think would be a real logistical problem. And maybe there's a way that the commission can look at reworking the system at some point in the future.
Why, since you brought it up, Mickey, now that we have many people here and other people may be watching, if anybody knows a landscape architect who would like to serve on the design review board,
Yes.
please have them contact me or contact Commissioner Grieco or Commissioner Wolfson. We're looking desperately for a landscape architect, even a professor of landscape architecture, who would have the time to serve on the design review board. It would fill out the board for our 7, and at least we'll have the full board.
That would be fantastic.
That's been the hardest position to find. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no,
you,
no.
but it was a good chance for a commercial.
And I appreciate it, and I reserve my time from your commercial. But in any event, I think that your solution or your recommendation is a good one. I'm real concerned that even though it might take work away from our law firm, it would just overburden staff and make the applications that we already have going through take longer. And staff does a great job. We work with them on a daily basis, but I know that they have a lot of applications, and if you double, triple the amount, it's going to be real tough. It's rare that I agree with Daniel, but I do agree with some of the stuff he said. The lot splits, I think that's fair. DRB review for lot splits makes a lot of sense. People are used to having 1 home there. If they're going to have 2, I think it's fair that the DRB review that and have the homeowners and the neighbors have a say. On the issue with the side courtyards, I'm not necessarily saying I'm opposed to some change there. I read that language over and over. I'm not an architect, I don't pretend to be one, but it was hard for me to really understand it. And I think maybe some working of that language, simplification of that, of that language would work better. Elena and I worked through it, we got through the language, but it just seemed
It is
like
difficult.
2 things. It's pretty complicated the way it's drafted, but when you really understand what it does, I think it limits what you can do. It has to be 8 foot here, 30% there, 5% this, and what you'll end up with is everybody sort of designing these side courtyards the exact same way, and it would
I
take
don't
away the
think,
art
though-
from the architecture.
Elena had showed me a design for a home that she was working on, or the architect was working on, and in fact, her interpretation was incorrect.
Okay.
The courtyard, as it's designed, works because even though part of it is used toward the overall size, she has it because it's only at 25%, she can go to 30%.
Okay.
So there really was no problem.
I guess that goes to my difficulty in understanding the language.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have the same difficulty,
I-
but the architects understand it.
Great.
But that particular, so, it's not egregiously, it really does make sense, and it certainly is not going to make Miami Beach look like Boca Raton.
No, that's not what we want.
They're not going to be cookie cutters. There's you get a good, Ralph Choate here, he has designed many homes. They're each different. He uses water features on some, and other architects do the same. They want to articulate the side, so it's
Right.
not just a wall with windows facing the neighbors.
And we want to keep
We
seeing
want
that. I
to
think
keep
that's great.
interesting. Yes, that's the idea.
So really, my biggest concern with all of this, and sort of stole my thunder because I think you addressed it before, is I just feel there's a logistical problem. I agree that DRB does a great job. They do a great thing for the neighborhoods in reviewing these homes, but staff does a great job too, and unless the system itself is reworked, I fear that we're going to overburden the system and this board. So maybe it needs more time to think through, but I think for now, your suggestion is a good one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mickey. Next. Mr. Commissioner Wolfson.
Hello, Commissioners,
Take over and go to this.
Chair Melfa.
Yes, sir.
My name is Dave Pritchard. I live at 120 West San Marino Drive, and my wife's just handing out some comments I prepared in a hurry because I didn't get too much notice of this. But so anyway, I'll just go over them quickly with you. I guess I keep coming back to the whereases that's in the regulations, and I see language in there about compatible development, character of existing neighborhood, and so on and so forth, and I just don't see that we're achieving that so in what I've seen so far. On the definitions for the interior side yard open space, I think that's a little clumsy, or maybe there was a typo there, but I suggest striking towards an interior or side-facing street yard and replacing it with to the side yard setback line. The roof deck definition also seems clumsy and vague. I suggest replacing it with roof deck means a structural platform designed for outdoor occupation and located directly above an enclosed floor area immediately one floor below. A roof deck may be located on top of the first story or second story. I know this became an issue with 126 West San Marino when they proposed to put a roof deck on the first story portion of the home and call it something else. I also think there should be a definition for terrace added in here because that seems to come up at times. As far as the roof decks on non-waterfront properties, I don't think there should be a delineation between a waterfront property or not a waterfront property as far as roof decks. I don't think that's right. On the side yards, I guess this probably came about from some of my comments on 126 West San Marino. As originally submitted, the side yard that was 1,342 square feet, which I felt should have been included in the lot area calculation, but the planning department felt otherwise. So with the proposed change, I just went through it very quickly, and what it would amount to is the builder would reduce, or most likely the builder would reduce the depth of this side yard by about 13 feet, and the net results would have only been about 47 square feet of the side yard would be included in the lot area. I'm thinking that you could do something simpler in that you're already requiring that the set or the depth of the side yard be 8 feet. Why not just say any area beyond the 8 feet should be included in the lot area calculation?
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Pritchard.
you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Marvin Weinstein.
Hi, Mr. Weinstein.
Right, Phil, and there's, yeah. I live at 5010 Alton Road. I've lived there for 42 years. Same house. It's pre-1942, of course. And if all, I don't know if you know the particular house, but it's pretty well known. I am very upset about what is being built across the street. I've never appeared before any boards here. And as you may know, my wife, incidentally, is retired from being an assistant city attorney here, Judy Weinstein. In the past, I've been practicing law. I'm a lawyer for 52 years. And, however, I also hold a degree. I graduated, my undergraduate degree is in architectural engineering. I have a lot of thoughts about what is being built, and it's typical of what's going on here, about what's being built, that is, about about a construction that is typical, that's being built across the street from me. One, notice. I never got notice. Never got notice. There's a defect in the way people are noticed. And I believe, indeed, to give an example, up the block, 5061 North Bay Road, which my home actually is on North Bay. It faces North Bay, and it faces this house. A home is, I read that they were going to demolish a home and build it up the block. There's no sign there, no post. So I looked around. I did see one. It's behind the fence. But you can't see it unless you look over the gate.
Yeah, the signs are supposed to be posted on the sidewalk, facing the sidewalk, so the public does know. That's an error.
5061, take a look. It's behind, there's a gate. There's a gate, and it's behind the gate. You can't see it. I indeed have a picture. I could project the picture right there. I have one of these cameras. I took a picture of it. But the home that's being built across the street from me, the architecture, I don't want to say anything about adverse or derogatory about the architecture, but it is totally inconsistent with the neighborhood. Moreover, I did not, as I said, I did not get a written notice, or no notice was ever posted. What they did was this, and I'm going to make a suggestion along these lines. They put a picture in front of the property of what was going to be built, a picture of the home that they were going to build. They were going to demolish what is there, which was renovated in 2011. But somebody liked the property, so they decided they were going to demolish this post-42 single-family home, 2 stories. They demolished it. It was set back. They had a beautiful driveway, royal palms leading up to it. This home that they put up, they came in, took out all of the royal palms, and built the house right up close to the street. Mind you, there's no sidewalks there, so it's hovering over you. Well, they put a picture there, a rendering of the home. I looked at it, and I said, gee, that looks okay. Everybody thought it looked okay. It was set back, big, it looked like an entrance and everything. Well, when they started building it, it looked nothing like it. Turns out it was a picture, a photo, a rendering of the rear. Why would you put a picture of the rear which had an open space and it was set back. Really, it was set back to the front, to the street. Now, I have that. I could project it to show you. I'll show you. It is outrageous. Accordingly, along those lines, I believe that if you're going, that you should give notice, written notice, to the neighbors on each side, on the block, and everybody across the street like me, including what is going to be built there, and a picture of the front and the rear and the sides. Now, this house that they're building there, it's one box on top of another box. Everyone who has seen it has said to me, it looks like they're building a Kmart, a Target. And even the pool, the fellow who services my pool, who services everybody's pool, came over to me and said, that house doesn't belong here. What? Now, as they're going up and up, I see now they're building something. The first floor is higher than an average floor. It's probably 12 or 15 feet high. So are there any limits to how high the ceiling can be on the first floor? Now they're going up another floor, so it's about 15 instead of the average 8.5 or 9 feet. It's about 15 to 20 feet. Now it's going up and up and up. Now I notice, even though the rendering doesn't show it, the picture they show you doesn't show anything on top of the 2 stories. They're now building concrete slabs on top of that, concrete blocks on top of that. Well, I ask, what's going on up there? He says, oh, they're building your roof. They're going to have a roof terrace up there, and they're going to put palm trees up there. And it's very upsetting. So
Thank you very much.
I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I just, so therefore, what I suggest is, as I said, notices, and that somebody should go by and take a look.
Right, and the sign should be displayed to the sidewalk.
Excuse me.
And the sign should be clearly visible to the public, not in back of the fence.
Right, and I'm talking about 5004 North Bay Road. Commissioner Malakoff?
Yes.
I suggest.
I'll drive
You probably
by it.
And my house is right across. If you look at it, and incidentally, on the second floor, what they did was, I think it's because of a needed setback, they cantilevered the second floor over the garage so that it probably interlopes or overhangs the setback in the front. And then there's a walkway that I hate to tell you that it reminded me of Alcatraz. You ever been to Alcatraz? They have walkways at Alcatraz, to watch the prisoners. They're building a walkway.
Is there an owner of this house, or is it's being built by a developer? Do you know?
It's an owner who drove up by my car in her Bentley, and said, I said, do you own? She says, yes, that's my home. I said, why is that picture like it? Doesn't look anything like the picture. Of course, I knew by now. She says, yes, that's the rear. We thought people would like to know what the rear looks like.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I hope that they'll landscape it well, and that eventually it'll not look as egregious as it does today.
Well, somebody else that was speaking here talked about it, instead of being a wall, you shouldn't have a wall. Well, that's a wall.
Yeah.
And every house, there's no sidewalks there. Every house, you can go blocks and blocks and blocks. They have a gate houses.
Right.
Everybody parks. You can't, it's all hidden.
Yes.
And you have opens. Very dry, Mike.
Okay.
Anyway, not this house. There won't even be sufficient parking, in my opinion, for that house. And on that street, you can't have people parking on the street.
No. Okay. We'll look into it.
So
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Wolfson, are you also going to take a look at it for me?
Sure, I'll come by and take a look on my way home today. Drive by your house and take a look at it.
Why don't you come in for a drink?
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jeff Donnelly. I just have two suggestions. One, there really is a public interest in demolition, really any part in the city, and I really think that at least posting the potential demolition of a property would be a useful step for the city to take. Would give an opportunity to neighbors that might not have a public hearing, but they would at least be able to do what Mickey and all these other attorneys do, is to approach the planning staff with their concerns. The second thing is that I think it really, since there is a public interest in this question, as envisioned by the Herald story this morning, that there really is a public interest here, that we might want to look at what Beverly Hills does in regard to the protection of historic properties in single-family homes in their neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go after you.
Of course, always. Hi, Terry Beanstock,
Good afternoon.
Miami Beach United, 2312 Bay Avenue, Sunset Island 3. A lot of interesting points have been made. I'd like to address a couple of them. I think the last gentleman raised something that's been nagging at me on the notice. This is a simple fix. If the notices would just link to the plans that were filed with the city, you know, I know how to go and search for them and get them, but 95% of the people out there don't. And I know when a notice goes out in my neighborhood, I get the emails saying, how do I see what it looks like? How do I find the plans? I think if there was just the link,
And
that would be simple.
90% of the people couldn't read the plans, so I don't know that that's going to help.
But at least it's a start for a lot of them.
And it would be nice
Yeah.
if they'd post a photo, but not of the rear.
Yeah, exactly. But something more than
Yeah.
the notice tells you absolutely nothing about what is being proposed. If there was some way to provide more notification, and the posting should not be allowed to be on fences. It should have to be a standalone posting on the street where it's obvious. Because I saw one this morning just near me where they posted it on a fence that's 20 feet, you know, a setback. It's beyond, you know, so it's 20 feet back, and it's you know, a little 8 by 11, and there's absolutely no way anyone would ever notice it because it's one of the 20 things posted on the fence. So I think those are simple fixes. As for the amendments that are being proposed, I'd like to say a few things. One is we're in favor of what you're trying to do, and we're very supportive of what staff has done and the proposed changes. A few of the changes we would like to see go further. And the pre-66, there are solutions to this problem. We sympathize with, we don't want to overburden the DRB and staff. On the other hand, more homes need to be reviewed just so that neighbors have more say in the process. There's got to be a middle ground here. There's got to be some way to have triggers that get more homes reviewed without overburdening the DRB. And I would just propose that you send this along with the pre-66 language, or at least open it so that other alternatives can be considered by staff and by the planning board at the September hearing, as opposed to just killing it now and saying, no, that's not proceed. So that's one thing. Number two is on the roof decks. I don't think everyone's always going to agree on which houses should have them, which houses don't, and that's a slippery slope. To me, it's a really simple answer. Roof decks, by their nature, are intrusive because it's a third story in a two-story neighborhood, and it always enables them to look down onto neighbors' homes, whether it be across the canal, across the street, or to the sides. And the simple answer has always been the simple answer. Roof decks should not be permitted as a third story in a two-story neighborhood, and that would make this very simple. From practical experience, at least on our islands, roof decks are developer concepts for marketing homes. They're not used. They're rarely do you see it because it's 1,000 degrees up there. You rarely see people up there other than when they rent them out for parties or for film shoots. But for people who are living at these homes, if you give them a nice deck off of the second story, or their second story, they're doing just fine. So it should not be a substitute for the fact that they don't have a lot of square footage. It is what it is. You're buying a piece of property, you know how much there is. Roof decks should be prohibited. Forgetting anything? That's all I wanted to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Other members of the public? I think you are the last person.
Ahmad Khamsi, 302
Okay.
West Toledo. You guys really have your job made out for you. It's really rough having to decide in a city which has so much going on, revolutions of all sorts, transformations of all sorts, values have changed, sizes have changed, appetites have changed, architecture has continued to evolve. I think it's really, really important when these things come up to our city that both the interest of the existing neighbors and the interest of the future neighbors be considered equally. There is never a neighbor that likes a construction. There's never a neighbor that likes a split, a lot split. There are many reasons why this is. We're used to our life, we're used to our neighborhood, we're used to our what is it called? Basically, what we're used to. So when transformation or innovation or differences come in, we always have a reaction. We see a lot of this. We have, and we thought by the last single-family regulation, we had put this to rest for a period of time. I'm not talking about the issues of adjustments and clarification, so I think those are great. However, it is the constant push of apparently a significant minority who continues to pressure for more control. No, it's for more leverage. It's for more intervention of the neighbors on the decisions of either a neighbor who is transforming his house or a new buyer who would like to build a new house. Those people have as much right as us, the existing neighbors, but they're not here to defend themselves. You are. So specifically, I would say, having heard pretty much both sides on a few of these issues, I think the city has to vouch for also the excessive controls, excessive detail and minutia. There are other things they say about Coral Gables. It's so overladen with levels and levels of controls and restrictions that architectural freedom has been significantly reduced. Do we want to head in that direction in Miami Beach? I don't believe so. So if we're thinking about being fair with those existing neighbors and future neighbors, if we're thinking about having moderate restrictions and moderate elements of control, I think those were precisely achieved in the last regulations, where we took a look at absolutely everything and decided what the fundamental issues were dividing our neighborhoods. Yet the pressure continues to exist to knock on your doors constantly to say, no, this needs to be tweaked, no, that needs to be tweaked, no, the neighbors need more say in this. Frankly, the neighbors are never going to be happy about any change in their neighbor. It just doesn't happen. The votes, a raise of hands, who is happy about a construction next door? Who's going to raise their hand? Now, having said that, specific issues. The extension to 1966, thank you for handling it. I would have gone the same way, but not for the same reason. I don't think it's proper for the city to say, oh, we need a couple more people, we don't want to invest in it, and for that reason we're not going to throw 2,000 homes at them. We would reach the same decision, but for a different reason. Going to the DRB, having new homeowners constantly challenged across a variety of fronts of architectural freedom and design, charging them with 3 to 4 months of additional time on their projects, making them have to go through those hurdles is excessive. Okay. I have been through them, and I tell you, at all costs we should avoid, and that's why in the regulations we established just a few months ago, everybody agreed in the middle ground there is enough control there. So I don't see why 66 is even in here. Second of all, on the rooftops, yes, there's some people who are always, a few people are always saying there is a privacy issue. There's a privacy issue, has been since pre-42, post-42, post-96, and in 2014. Anybody that has a 2-story over 1-story has an issue, but nobody's talking about that. It's always trying to affect the newcomers. Now, let me propose something very different. I think absolutely landlocked homes should have a roof. It was mentioned, I live on an island. We have breezes. They only come at night. Those rooftops are greatly refreshing, never during the steering day. Thank you, Terry. But certainly at night, they're marvelous. And in my particular case, I live on the water. My best, most dramatic, most stunning view is from my rooftop. It's just majestic. Would I want my neighbor behind me not to have the option for a breeze or be able to see through whatever homes, because, you know, we're only taking up 25% of the volume. There is the opportunity for landlocked homes to see the view, the water, and enjoy the breeze. And now we're going to tell those people, no, you can't have that? That's not fair. You're taking value from them, you're taking enjoyment from them, and I don't believe that's being neighborly. Third, the modification of the side yard, I would just leave it to what Ralph Choff said. This stands in line with, do we want to have more control over architecture and design, or do we want to give them freedom? I would vote for freedom. And with regards to the lot splits, we do this all the time. Neighbors come upset, and many times with great reason. But then the solution seems to be, well, let's send it to the DRB. We've had years of that. Let's not continue it. Because you're going to send a lot split to the DRB. What happens? It's a waste of their time, it's a waste of the owner's time, and it's a waste of the neighbor's time. They do not have the guidance, they do not have the control to do diddly with that. But what it'll do, it'll stop at home, it'll throw it into a 3, 4, 5 month issue, and at the end of it all, the DRB can't say anything but, okay.
Thank you very much.
Lovely.
I just want to clarify the number 3, the adding a requirement for DRB review. It's not of the lot split itself. That goes, I believe, to the planning board for lot splits, correct?
Yes.
It's just that when new homes are being built, the new homes that will be built will have DRB review. Okay, we have Joe Manning and Matthew, and that's it, because this is going much longer than expected, and we have other items on our agenda.
Isn't it always?
Always.
This gentleman always confuses me. And I tell you, nothing upsets me more than someone who thinks he's speaking for me. I don't even know when I'm speaking for me. I have to sort things out. It takes a long time, okay? I just wanted to talk about the article that was in the newspaper today. And this may seem frivolous, but Commissioner Whitehorn, who's not here today, unfortunately, talked about taking baby steps and giant steps. Well, this brought me right back to my childhood 100 years ago, when we used to play a game on the street called Mother May I. You're all too young to remember that game. And you had someone in the front, you had all the players in the back. The person in the front had his or her back to the players, and the players had to say, Mother, may I take 5 baby steps? Mother, may I take 1 giant step? And the first person who got to the front won. Well, you know, everybody, we will win, but it's not the size or number of our steps. It is with a feeling of community and with an idea of preserving the character of this neighborhood and doing the best we can. And all I can say is, even though I don't think we should play this game, I'm glad that Barbara Capitman took a lot of giant steps.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Good
Matthew
afternoon.
Amster, 200 South Biscayne Boulevard in Miami. Our firm handles lots of...
For the record, Joe Manning gave me the rules to Mother May I. So they're part of the record now. Thanks, Joe.
Mother, may I take 1 step forward?
Mother, you may speak.
Thanks. Our firm does handle lots of the applications for single-family homes before the DRB, and certainly we've been through a lot of trials with the new regulations that finally got passed in February, which is not all too that long ago. There was, concerns about the interpretations, but I think that where we're headed, I have 2 points about the courtyards is the first point, that I think that this new revision is being a bit more restrictive to the architects, similar to what Ralph's points were. The effect can be variable based on, again, the lot widths. Longer lot widths are going to be subject to this even more. The restrictions that are being imposed with the developable lot width percentage, as well as the percentage of the lot covered by these cutouts, can have the effect of making the architect have to square up the building, which I don't think is the intended consequence. The courtyards and cutouts have a great benefit. They are able to address neighbor concerns, push portions of the building away from the existing buildings that are next door. If you are in a situation where you cannot provide as many of those as you like, you start to breed to have these homes look a bit more of the office-like. You can make more narrower homes that have bigger pushbacks from one or both property lines. They can be single-loaded. They can provide a lot of light coming in, and that has a lot of benefits for both this homeowner, in the subject property, as well as lessening impacts on those neighbors. I mean, really, what you're getting at is the mass of a building is what's perceived from the street by the vast majority of people, except for what the side property owners. It's really what's at the front. Many of these courtyards and cutouts are intended to be towards the back to address the neighborhood issues. So that is an issue where, again, providing privacy, I think this starts to restrict the architect's ability to address the context of where they are. It's becoming a bit too burdensome. And also, there are a number of applications that are in the works, and just like what happened with the February regulations, there's an issue of applicability. They might want to consider exceptions for people who are in the middle of this process. If you choose to go forward, I think you should consider exceptions so that you're not just changing the rules in a very short time for some of these people who put in months of time, effort, money, experts, and design. And then the second point about the garages, whether it's a single-story garage or a garage with habitable space above it, it's in the front of the home. It's the mass that's being perceived from the home. So even if it's a single story attached to the building, it should count because it is part of the first floor volume when you're referencing this 70% issue. That's my points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, have you want to weigh in on any of these, or?
Commissioner, do you want me to read in some of the changes that we had
Yes,
discussed, just
yes,
so that they're on the
please.
record?
Yeah,
Please.
Yeah.
So the first one would be on page 4 of the ordinance, and that pertains to section 142, 105, paren B, paren 4, toward the bottom C. And this is the part regarding the 70% rule. And in the ordinance, we had crossed out exclusive of any enclosed required parking space, and we would replace that with exclusive of any one-story parking structure, to make it clear that it would be a one-story parking structure wouldn't count as part of the 70% calculation.
So the way it's amended now, it does not count?
Yeah, the way that it is applied now, required parking within that wouldn't count. But this would make it exclusive of the actual structure. So if the structure ended up being larger, we wouldn't be counting that structure within, in terms of calculating the 70% volume to a second floor to first floor volume.
What's the thought process behind that?
That the 70% rule would apply to that part of the structure that is 2 stories. By adding by allowing them to utilize that one-story structure, that's more volume that they can use to have potentially more volumetric space. So this would limit the amount of volumetric space that they could have without going to the DRB.
Okay.
The next one would be on page 5 of the ordinance, and this is basically something just to correct a typo. At the very bottom of page 5 of the ordinance, where it says, "The intent of this regulation shall be to break up long expanses of uninterrupted 2-story volume at or near the required side yard setback line, an exception," and I'm going to add this language, "from the minimum requirements of this provision may be granted only through Historic Preservation Board or DRB approval." And the reason for this is because we had added some language that would allow for a larger area than the minimum, but we had put a cap on that, and we didn't want this to read as something where the DRB or HP could allow for more, but if they could potentially allow for less. And that was the intent of the ordinance. On page 7 of the ordinance, on paren E, paren 1, we had put in some language that said, "In the event an architecturally significant single-family home is proposed to be substantially retained, the posting and mail notice requirements of section 142 should not be required." We're going to take out the word posting and just say the mail notice requirements shall not be required.
Okay.
And then the last item would be another typo on page 9 of the ordinance, paren 3, after the word 1966, it would be was done without the following procedures.
Right, but we're also, I think that we're all in agreement regarding the 1966 issue, I think that.
Yeah, and these are just the changes that we're suggesting, and then obviously any more changes that you guys have, will incorporate those into the version that goes to the planning board.
Well, I'll piggyback on to Commissioner Malikoff's suggestion. I think that there's going to be some consensus up here that the 1966 provision that was being discussed, that we're not going to adopt that part. At least my motion going forward on the amendment's not going to adopt that part.
I'll second that.
But I would like to include the recommendation by the chairwoman regarding the demolition permits. I know that she had made a suggestion, and that for all demolition permits to prevent vacant lots from just sitting there. I think we can include that as well.
That's actually a separate ordinance that's going before the planning board in September.
Okay.
This board discussed demolition procedures overall and referred an ordinance to the planning board, and that will be considered by the planning board at their September meeting.
Okay, and the recommendations that we made, was that included in those
Yes,
recommendations?
any demolition permit, they would first have to get DRB approval for the new construction.
Okay.
And then have to be substantially along in terms of the building permit before the demo permit can be issued.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was, Mariano Fernandez, the building official, reminded me of something. Commissioner, when we spoke earlier, I said fire because they are part of the development review process. Single-family homes are exempted from fire.
Okay.
So we just want to put that on the record. A building permit is signed off on by the building department, the zoning department, the planning and zoning department, and other departments, whoever in the queue. So
Okay.
that's really what we're talking
And
about.
that, whether it's pre-66 or pre-2014.
Any building.
Any single-family home that's going to be demolished is going to have a notice posted saying that it's pending demolishment. And before it can be demolished, plans need to go to the planning department and to the planning and zoning department, the building department, public works, and then the building permit needs to be substantially complete before the existing home can be demolished.
Well, the law now on pre-42 is that the building permit has to be issued. I mean,
Right,
it's
I'm
got
talking
to
now
be.
about all others other than pre-42.
Right, and that's what we recommended earlier on
Okay.
the demolition procedures.
Okay, then that's fine. The final building permit would need to be approved.
The only thing that I think what you guys are recommending is that as part of those demolition procedures for single-family homes, the property would be posted if there was a request for demolition.
For purposes of today, I guess. yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask a question of the
Yes.
chair?
Yes.
What would be the, I guess, what would be the negative aspect of if a home happens to get demolished and, you have a lot? I guess part of me thinks that having a home that is dilapidated and hasn't been inhabited for 3, 4, 5 years is worse than having a vacant lot.
I
mean, I'd rather have
agree,
the
I
vacant-
agree, but the home, if it's an unsafe structure, it would get demolished. I mean, that's, we're not talking about that.
But what if you have
We're talking
something
about
in
a lot of
between?
homes that are in good condition, that were built in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, that are completely habitable. People are living there, but new people are buying them, and instead of saying, I'm going to move into this house and make it maybe an addition or add a family room, instead they say, I'm going to demolish it, I want to build a whole new house, I want a modern house, I don't want this house.
Right.
So they buy it for the lot, and they build. It's those type of homes, but yes, if a house is sitting there empty for 4 years and it's a derelict home, it should be demolished.
But that's kind of what I'm saying then. So what's the point of making sure that they have a building permit before they demolish? I guess you do have people, then it's encouraging some new construction. I don't know, listen, I know that sounds like blasphemy out there, but, it could be a pretty new home on a vacant lot. I mean, I don't see what's so wrong about that. Once they demolish something that's been there for a long time, even if they don't get to building their final house.
I think, Commissioner, the problem is that homes are being purchased now on speculation. So what happens when the real estate market changes, which it does every few years. Hopefully, it won't change for a long time.
Yeah, it's gonna-
But let's say the
Pretty
real
soon.
estate market does change, and people, developers have purchased these houses, planning to demolish them to build new, larger homes, more to modern taste, say. Okay, the market changes. They're sitting with these homes. They can still sell the homes as is if they wanted to, and if they demolish them and those empty lots sit there for 4 or 5 years, and weeds grow, and it becomes a really derelict lot, I think it's better to have somebody buy the existing house and live in it than have the empty lot. That's the thought.
Is there any practical difficulty to that process, to requiring somebody to pull a permit for construction before they demolish? I mean, is there any, I mean, I don't know, I'm just wondering, you know, if I'm the owner of the property and I want to demolish my lot, if I'm demolish my house, and, you know, I don't know what I want to build there. Maybe I don't know what I want to build there for a couple of years. Maybe I want to think about it for 2-3 years. Maybe I want to sleep on it for 6 months, and I don't want to build
You want to sleep
anything.
in your bedroom in the meantime?
No, I want to sleep in my other bedroom. Let's say I'm blessed enough to have multiple houses, multiple bedrooms, and I want to sleep in my other house and think about what I want to build on that lot. But I want to demolish the house because I just don't like it. I don't like looking at it when I drive by. Maybe you like looking at it when you drive by, but I don't like looking at it. So I want to tear it down. What then? I mean, why are you telling me I got to go pay for plans and permits and all that stuff, even though I don't want to build that new house?
Well,
That's my question.
Our recommendation is based on that requirement is already there for a pre-42. So it was based on just treating all lots, all houses, the same.
Well, hold on, though. Pre-1942 is different, because pre-1942, we've determined that there is there's an architectural, historical integrity to those houses. There's really no better way of preserving them other than setting down an arbitrary date, and we did it, and it's not totally arbitrary. It's, pre-World War II homes, pretty much. And so that stands for that purpose, because when you require somebody to do that, you're actually saying, you make it a little more significant and serious. You say, well, we want to see your plans, we want to see what you're going to do, we want to make sure that it's compatible before we tell you you can tear it down. So that makes sense for 1942, but once you go to pre-1966, my house, I love it, but, it certainly isn't something that, I would see somebody else who had more resources want to tear it down, and that wouldn't hurt my feelings. If somebody said, I bought the Wolfson house, and I don't like it because I don't think it's the prettiest thing in the world, I want to tear it down. So, I just don't see why we should tell people they can't tear down.
They can tear down
They just
the
have
house.
to
They can demolish
they have to pull a permit to build something else.
Yes, because if somebody bought the house next door to you and decided just to demolish the house next door to you, and you have next door to you a house with an old swimming pool that still sits there stagnant, and the house is torn down, and they decide against it, and the lot just sits next to you, breeding mosquitoes and fleas and who knows what in South Florida climate, wouldn't you have rather kept the house? It's a nice house next door to you now. Wouldn't you rather have somebody living there next door to you rather than sitting with an empty lot that goes
Listen,
fallow?
I would say that my preference, I think, is outweighed by the property interests of the person who owns the house. I think, we may agree to disagree, but I just think that person, they're going to be subject to the city's code enforcement laws anyway, and be required to keep the grass cut and keep it, clear and free of any dangerous anything and debris, and so if they don't, and I've participated in this multiple times with staff, getting the grass cut, getting, basically, and then they put a lien on the property. It's a first priority lien if they have to clean it up. And so generally those lots, while it can be annoying and aggravating for a neighbor, they do get rectified. But I had just one question I had with respect to 1966, because sometimes when these committee meetings happen and then things go forward, it just want to make it very clear that we're removing all discussion of 1966, other than I guess you are supportive of leaving that date in as it relates to requiring people to pull permits. Is that, I mean, pull permits
No,
for the construction?
No.
You're just saying everything.
1966, just,
You're saying, well, I'm sorry, no, okay, so you're taking 1960s out entirely, and then that
Yes.
requirement will apply to everything 2014 everything from today?
after 1942.
But that's a different ordinance, right?
It's a different
That's a conversation for another day. That's part, this ordinance does not address
So,
that
okay,
demolition
so,
requirement that
but,
we just addressed.
okay, but, so we're taking everything 1966 out of this this ordinance, am I correct?
Yes.
Tom, you guys hear that, right?
Yeah, this
Everything
committee already approved
1966
that
is
and
coming.
referred it to planning board.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So if we got a second, the other question I had is no, it's saying no roof decks for dry side houses, and I was wondering, I understand, I guess, the prohibition on roof deck for a dry side house would be that it would inhibit sight lines or tower over another house. Is that the concern? I mean, so my thought was, instead of prohibiting that, because you see this all the time in the Northeast, where I just came back from, they call them widow's walks up there, and they have them all over the place in the dry side, specifically so people can see to the water. And nobody seems to have, I mean, they don't really have much of a beef about it up there. I don't.
Swimming pools next door, though, in Maine.
Well, some of them do, but I don't know why they would build them. It's a pain because they crack. But the point is that those roof decks. I mean, I think that you're taking away a nice. But I think what you could potentially do is just try to legislate a way that it doesn't inhibit or tower over the neighboring homes, rather than prohibit it entirely.
That was the idea. That's why you can have it on a single-family home or
Right, on the dry lots, it's only allowed on the one-story homes. It's not prohibited on dry lots. It's allowed on one-story homes.
Yeah, but say you have
Is
a
what
two-story
the
house. I mean, a lot of these nicer houses where people would, and on a one-story house, if you put a roof deck up there, you're not going to be able to see to the water. So, I mean, the point is on a two-story home, a roof deck, I think, is a reasonable amenity, so long as we require, and the widow's walks that you see, they're on like a real small portion of a house, and they don't do anything to the neighbors. I would just think that if you could find a way to design it so, or require the design of it so that it doesn't bear upon the neighbors or inhibit sight lines, and it's compatible. I don't think it's something you want to take away completely for a two-story house. I think it's,
I find that neighbors have been objecting to roof decks for some time. They're used for parties, they're used for music. Music carries, particularly up on the roof deck, particularly in the narrower lots that exist, many on the dry side. Somehow the houses that are 100 feet or 150 foot wide on the water and have roof decks, they're on the wide bay.
I got
And
a
that's-
potential solution.
That's different.
So I agree with you. Like, I don't think that you should be able to have a roof deck on the top of your two-story house on the dry lot that is so enormous that you're having parties there. What I'm talking about is seriously like if I want to put a chair up there and sit out there and smoke a cigar on the top of my house, I mean, what impact is that on anybody? I'm talking about something small, something that's tasteful, that they come up with a percentage of the roof. If it's less than 15% or 10% or 20% of the roof, then you can have it on a two-story house, and that allows an individual or his or her family to be able to access something that has absolutely no impact on anybody.
Commissioner, before this was recommended, as the law currently reads, you're allowed 25% of the enclosed floor area. If you think that's too much, or...
For 25% of the current FAR?
25% of the floor area below. So if you got a
25% of the footprint, you're saying of it. So just if there's a problem and that's allowing for too much, then you just reduce that, because 25% of the say you
And
have
it
a
also has
two-story
to
house
be-
that's 2,500 square foot.
We can look at a scale.
footprint.
We can look at a scale. 25% of a huge home is
It's
different
too
than
big.
25% of a 10,000,
Right,
et
if
cetera,
you
et cetera,
come
et
up
cetera.
with something
So we can come up with a scale and recommend.
not to exceed 200 square feet or 150 square feet.
We'll look at it if that's your...
I mean, 100 square feet, something small like that, is instead of prohibiting it, I think you give, because I'm supportive of the concept, it's just instead of prohibiting it, I think that you give somebody the opportunity to do something that's so tiny and small that it allows 3 to 4 people up there to enjoy, a sunset or whatever it might be at their house. I don't think,
Okay,
Commissioner,
we'll
that...
look at it. We'll look at a scale.
So
Do you want
Is
to?
there,
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move the ordinance amendments with the changes that we discussed. Part of my motion is to remove the roof deck from this amendment. I think we need to look into it more. I'm kind of I'm halfway between Commissioner Malakoff and Commissioner Wolfson on this. I'm not sold on either way, and I don't want to move that forward without us further discussing. It may be that we do something where they're smaller. We'll have to figure that out. So I'm going to move that we remove that. I'm going to move everything else forward. That doesn't mean that once we go to full commission, I'm completely on board with the courtyard aspect of it, because I'm going to be humbly honest, it's a little over my head, and I don't do math on Wednesdays. So I'm going to need a little bit on that one, but otherwise, that's my motion going forward on the ordinance. I don't know if I have a second.
I mean, I'll second it. The question, though, is there already zoning in progress on any of this?
No.
Okay, are we going to create zoning in progress?
If the planning board.
You're shaking your head no, but he's about to
Not
say
yet.
if.
Did you ask yes or no?
It has
I'm
to-
answering yes or no, and he's going to give you a long answer.
Okay.
No.
Well, you're not, but the planning board on September 23rd could potentially create zoning.
By doing what? By accepting our recommendation or doing whatever they?
By transmitting an ordinance back to the city commission, which would come back to you in October.
So if the planning board decides to put back pre-1966, then that's zoning in progress?
It would be zoning in progress, but only up until the commission date in October.
Yeah, but that, I don't think, is there any way we can prevent that legally from becoming zoning in progress? I mean, I just don't want that again, because that was just a ridiculous cacophony of calls.
You could, at your September 10th commission meeting, you could remove that part of this from the referral, and then it would not be able to be considered by the planning board on September 23rd.
Okay, so why don't you,
And then,
well, why would that be in the referral anyway? Okay,
Because
that
it
would
was
still be in the
From
referral.
the
was
July
referred to the planning board the
23rd.
last-
But if that's your recommendation, we can do a
Right.
C4 memo for the September 10th meeting that specifically
Please.
removes that so that the planning board can't consider that for zoning in progress.
Ding, 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 please. Listen, they may be a little longer than your explanations, but they're still way better than what we used to hear. And I'm not disparaging anybody, but they're way more concise. I'm very impressed with your ability to really put stuff into a nutshell there, Mr. Mooney. I know, I seconded the motion.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to move next to number 5, the Sidewalk Cafe solicitation. And then after that, we're going to take the Washington Avenue scope of services.
Who's presenting?